Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrael Hawkins. Well, we have quite a few different stories here in the news this evening. We're going to talk about the Pope's recent visit to Iraq. Also, we'll talk about transportation requirements. Now, we might need a vaccine passport. Larry has those details for us. And also, we're going to look at some of the restrictions being loosened or lifted rather regarding the COVID-19. Some states are doing away with the mask mandates, while some people are saying this is way too early, too soon. So we'll have those details and many more. But what's worse than the coronavirus pandemic? Well, our first video here for you answers that question. Take a look at this.
This week, the United Nations World Food Program warned that as a result of the coronavirus, the number of people facing food crisis around the world could double to 265 million people. For how the developing world is faring, already suffering in many places from the effects of climate change and conflict, I'm joined by David Beasley, Executive Director of the World Food Program. David Beasley, welcome back to the NewsHour. First of all, you came down with COVID-19 some weeks ago. You are saying this week to the United Nations, to anybody who will listen, that as the world deals with this terrible health crisis, at the very same time, there's another crisis having to do with food.
Well, before COVID came on the scene, literally in the last 6 months, I'd been telling leaders around the world, and especially in Europe, that we had a perfect storm coming. We literally were going to see 2020 being the worst humanitarian crisis year since World War II because of Yemen and Syria and South Sudan, the deterioration of the Sahel, climate extremes, cyclones and hurricanes, Sudan, Ethiopia, DRC, and you just can't imagine all these things together. Then desert locusts came upon that, and I'm like, this is just terrible. And then COVID, we couldn't believe it. And so we were already calculating 135 million people around the world before COVID marching to the brink of starvation. And now with the new analysis with COVID, we're looking at 260 million people. And I'm not talking about hungry. I'm talking about marching towards starvation, and that is a catastrophe in itself.
That's a number that I think is almost impossible for us to comprehend, that many people could be that close to starving.
That does seem to make matters worse. Pandemics can sometimes be random as far as who's affected by it, but it seems like this food crisis is affecting billions of people throughout the world currently, and has been for quite a long time.
Right, and although we've been dealing with the coronavirus now for a year or so, the food insecurity here, the food crisis has been going on a lot longer and affecting a lot more people.
That's right, many, many years. Well, breaking news as the pandemic continues to rage on, some states say they've had enough. The southern states of Texas and Mississippi are rolling back their previous mandates, lifting restrictions on businesses and residents alike. One of the biggest changes? Well, face masks will no longer be mandatory, even though experts are warning of a fourth surge looming in the U.S.
Ironically, the reversal of restrictions comes just one day after the CDC director shared deep concerns about Americans letting their guard down and lifting restrictions, thinking it would cause a lot of ground to be lost in the war with coronavirus. But Governor Greg Abbott said, quote, "It is now time to open Texas 100%. Also, I'm ending the statewide mask mandate."
Well, the Lone Star State is not alone in its thinking. Governor Tate Reeves of Mississippi said This new order removes all of our county mask mandates and allows businesses to operate at full capacity. But some public health officials are warning it's too soon, and the measures are throwing caution to the wind.
Well, Dr. David Pearce told CBS News, Evening News, if we lift the restrictions now, we're just asking for another wave. And remember, every time we get another wave, people die. Now is not the time, he said, to be lifting restrictions. The finish line may be in view, but we're not there yet, unquote. So the restrictions are being lifted across the country in different ways. Now, Massachusetts has opened their restaurants to full capacity and are allowing live performances. San Francisco is also about to open their indoor dining rooms for the first time in many months. So not just the state of Texas, other states are following.
Right. Well, in Chicago, bars and restaurants can now stay open until 1 a.m. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot explained the decision, stating, because people are still adhering to the public health guidelines, it makes all the difference in the world.
And while the country is pushing to get back to some sense of normalcy, President Joe Biden is pushing for more vaccinations and faster, moving up his timeline for the entire country to get the COVID vaccine. Now, the president is promising to have enough vaccine by the end of May to give every adult in America their shots.
Well, President Biden also revealed how he would accomplish this, announcing to the press, and we quote, "We also invoke the Defense Production Act." Well, this is a type of collaboration between companies that we saw in World War II, end quote. So what this means is that some companies who failed to come up with their own vaccine will now be teaming up with their rivals who have created vaccines to produce at a far greater capacity.
Well, one example, Merck & Company has agreed to mass produce Johnson & Johnson's new vaccine, significantly increasing the amount of doses available to the public. Now, some are calling this a game changer, and with the president urging Americans to get vaccinated, it is a race against time as new COVID variant cases are on the rise.
Dr. David Pearce agrees, saying, "It's literally a call to wake up. While we're getting fatigued, these variants will take any opportunity to succeed if we give it to them. And so we cannot just give them that opportunity," end quote. Well, the president is also directing all states to make getting teachers their shots, a priority. Now, Biden's goal is to have all educators vaccinated by the end of March.
Well, while some states are loosening these restrictions on the coronavirus, the others are requiring the vaccine to travel, hence calling it COVID passports. Now, Larry McGee has the details on this story and many more. Larry, what is all entailed here in this COVID passport?
Even more alarming than the plague itself are some of the ideas being promoted and enacted because of it, the latest one of which involves proof of COVID inoculation in order to participate in commerce. The measure is being referred to as vaccine passports and is still under consideration by American business owners and legislators, but it has already been implemented by Israel and officially proposed by Britain. The idea is being billed as a way for the public to return back to their desired lifestyles. Once a person has completed their rounds of injections, they will then be given proof of vaccination, which they can then use as an ID of sorts to enter bars, hotels, and other areas. In Israel, you have to scan in to get in, and nations across Europe are in deliberations to take similar action. Concerns are already being raised, however, regarding the potential for discrimination against those who can't afford or will not accept the shot. Opponents to the measure say that those who don't receive vaccination will not be able to participate socially and economically in the same way as those who do receive or accept the shot. Despite objections, airlines are also starting to get on board with the idea so that by the end of the year, potential passengers might need their vaccine passports in order to fly. That microbes were flying around and dwelling in the skies was big news a few years ago, but very recently, scientists have become aware of an even more shocking finding. Microorganisms are capable of surviving and thriving in Arctic temperatures for millenniums, and as the globe warms and releases them from their frozen captivity, there is great alarm now as to what will be the end result of their awakening. Here's a video showing the science on the issue.
There exists on our planet an entire hidden world that has laid dormant for eons. But this world full of strange organisms from prehistoric times is slumbering no more. As global warming threatens the world's ice masses, some scientists have warned that sleeping in that same ice, completely isolated from the rest of the world, could lurk deadly killers just waiting to be unleashed. In a quest to understand the potential threat, science has now discovered some of these ancient threats, and some were completely unknown to science until now. High up in the Tibetan mountains, scientists have labored to drill into some of the oldest and most pristine ice on Earth for years, and in doing so, brought back ice core samples that date back thousands and thousands of years. Two of these samples predate the earliest known human civilization by a whopping 11,000 years. Trapped within the ice lurks a sampling of the microscopic world present at the time the ice was formed. While the total biomass of trapped microbial life is vanishingly small, far less than seawater, scientists have refined techniques to identify what life exists within that ancient ice. What they've discovered has been nothing short of revolutionary for science. The two samples were collected in 1992 and 2015, and while the ice was untouched for thousands of years, upon being removed, the exterior was immediately contaminated with modern microbial life. For years, these icy cores were kept in frozen storage, the contents within kept pristine thanks to their icy prison. Recently, scientists discovered a way to at last melt the cores while eliminating any chance of modern contamination, allowing researchers to peer into the microbial world of prehistory. Keeping the samples in a cold room, the scientists used a sterilized bandsaw to saw away 0.2 inches of the entire outer layer of the ice core. Then they bathed the freshly sawed cores in ethanol to melt away a further 0.2 inches of ice. Finally, they used sterile water to melt away 0.2 more inches of ice. After losing over half an inch of ice, the cores were finally free of modern contaminants. And when scientists peered into their microscopes, they found a veritable Ice Age microbial Jurassic Park waiting for them. Investigating the two ice cores, scientists found 33 different groups of viruses, with hundreds of individual members of each. Of these groups of viruses, though, the greatest discovery was the fact that a whopping 28 of them were completely unknown to scientists until now. Forebodingly, in a follow-up interview, one researcher stated that humanity is far from having sampled even the majority of estimated virus groups still alive in frozen ice around the world today, meaning there are more viruses lurking, waiting for their chance to be free of their icy prison than we ever dreamt of. Tibet is far from the only place on Earth that researchers are digging up ancient microbial life, though, and in 2017, scientists made a profound discovery when they brought up ice samples from the depths of a frozen Antarctic lake. This lake had laid frozen for many thousands of years, effectively cocooning its underwater environment from the outside world. There, scientists discovered a microbe that they hope may answer the ultimate question about viruses. Did viruses evolve as a unique form of life, or did they arise as a parasitic life form that could exist only by infecting healthy cells? The question is a tricky one to answer, and scientists aren't even sure that viruses are truly alive anyway. That's because every living thing on Earth is made up of cells except for viruses. Viruses are in essence nothing more than a piece of genetic material encased in a hard shell that has only a single function: infect healthy cells and use the cell's energy resources to replicate. Viruses are in essence nothing more than a piece of genetic material encased in a hard shell that has only a single function: infect healthy cells and use the cell's energy resources to replicate. What isn't theory, though, is the plausibility of these ancient viruses being a deadly threat to life today. Because viruses aren't truly alive in the sense that we understand it, they're able to survive their icy imprisonment, and scientists were shocked when a virus discovered in Siberia not only awoke, but began infecting healthy modern cells. This megavirus, so named because it's many times the size of what scientists thought was the biggest virus, infects amoebas. Once a victim has been found, the virus does much as any other virus, uses the amoeba to create more of its own kind, eventually destroying the amoeba. The HIV virus, for instance, is the fastest evolving entity known, and while it reproduces very sloppily and accumulates a great deal of genetic mutations as it does so, it also reproduces at a rate of billions of copies of itself every day. You really only need one good copy that randomly mutates to affect humans for a virus to become a global pandemic. Then, of course, there's also the fact that scientists fear as the world melts, ancient strands of current diseases could go on a global comeback tour. Since we haven't been exposed to these diseases for thousands of years, modern humans would have virtually no defense against these microbial invaders.
Relations between the Catholic Church and Iraq are thawing as well. As part of the Vatican's agenda to unify all religions, the Pope is scheduled to meet this week with Iraq's Grand Shir Cleric, the Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani, operating on the age-old model of create a crisis and be the solution. Now that the Western proxies of ISIS have wreaked sufficient havoc in the land, the pontiff arrived in the nation under the cloak of peace and to a hero's welcome. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Tom, Jeff, back to you.
Well, that's interesting. You know, with the Pope visiting Iraq, seeing as though there's a lot of, you know, fighting and missile attacks in those areas, you know, I kind of wonder how that's going to go over, you know, with him being in that Middle East area right now.
Right, and the other story that Larry had that was pretty interesting was the video showing how the scientists actually studied that ice that was frozen so many feet down,
Right.
and discovered new viruses that and
lying
and
dormant.
bacteria, right, that have just been dormant, that were unknown to science until they looked at that ice. So it gives opens up a whole different field of science, so to speak, in discovering what's really down there and how long it's been down there, just covered up and suppressed, and now coming to the surface.
How will it affect mankind since this generation of people doesn't have the immunity built up in our system to fight those old diseases off?
Right.
Well, Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq was recently attacked by Iranian ballistic missiles where U.S. military personnel were stationed. Well, take a look at this next video from the view of some of the soldiers who were there at the base, and of course what it was like for them when those missiles struck.
Shocking things there in the video is that they didn't think Iran was capable of such accuracy, and that was kind of a surprise, as they mentioned there, that it took them all by surprise because they didn't think they had that ability to do so. So that kind of opens up, you know, it gives America something to think about now as they, you know, put the sanctions against Iran and kind of that tough talk that goes back and forth between these two countries.
That's right. To see what Iran's willing and capable of fighting back.
Well, Damascus was also rocked by missile attacks on its southern outskirts, heavily damaging sites that are said to belong to Iran. Now, Syria's air raid sirens were activated as incoming missiles were detected coming in from the Golan Heights area in Israel. According to a Syrian state television station, a number of the missiles were shot down, but several hit their marks. Now, the Assad government blamed Israel for the attacks, but an IDF spokesperson neither confirmed or denied the attacks.
With the ongoing conflict between Iran and the U.S. Firing missiles at one another, Iran recently fired missiles at a coalition air base in western Iraq. Now, this after Biden administration shot missiles at specific targets in Iran, returned by the act that Iran that is returned the act by firing 10 missiles into the air base. But of course, no U.S. or coalition personnel were killed, but one contractor is reported to have died as the result of a heart attack related to those missile attacks.
Well, Iraqi military said that there was not significant damage to the base and the launch pad for the missiles has been found. Well, the fears are that there will be a continual retaliation between the two countries of the United States and Iran, the same as we saw last year that led to the death of the Iranian general Qasem Soleimani, who was killed outside the Baghdad airport by a U.S. drone strike. Now, this recent attack comes 2 days before the Pope's visit to Iraq, and of course, the Iran nuclear deal is not quite moving forward as planned.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're continually seeing that pressure from the United States put on Iran, and it's not just the sanctions, but we're also seeing the military actions being placed on them. But obviously, you know, it's affecting them in many more ways than that.
Right, and some people were wondering how the new president, Joe Biden, would respond. Well, we kind of saw that because he was pretty quick to take military action against Iran. So, you know, they're realizing that even though the face might have changed, the administration still is very quick to move against Iran.
Yeah, the plans are still moving forward. And then we have to deal with the fact that, you know, many of the scientists and doctors are worried that now with these you know, several states lifting the restrictions on COVID-19 mask mandates, you know, how much fuel is that going to add to the fire that we're dealing with in regards to health throughout the United States as well? So,
right, and especially with the new variants now, that quite a few more that are popping up, that's going to have its impact as well.
yeah, along with that push to get everyone vaccinated by May.
Well, if you'd like to find out more about these stories, contact the House of Yahweh, and when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them at any of their websites by going to Yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, or Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. You can email the House of Yahweh at info@yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen. And like we've mentioned before, don't forget the best aid to assist you in the study of your sacred scriptures, the Yisrael Says and the Ask Yisrael program. You can find those two free online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by going to YisraelSays.com and AskYisrael.com. Well, don't go anywhere. Up next, Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.